With Wasteland 3's early access soon arriving, I'd like to talk about what the series needs to improve upon in the upcoming installment, and perhaps see further development of during the early access period. Wasteland 2 was one of those games that matured like a fine wine every time I played it. At first I was a little hesitant to delve deeper, but once I got under its surface I got to experience one of the best modern role-playing games I've ever touched. However, if I wasn't so resilient, I feel I would have just leapt over it after I did the few Let's Play videos that are here on the channel. The accessibility of Wasteland 2 is a little uninviting, with a more complex UI that the majority of gamers aren't quite used to, and it has a rather cheap and basic looking main menu welcoming you in. Now, I understand that Wasteland 2 is the love child of the original Wasteland and Fallout team members, and they wanted to recapture the feeling of the classic isometric RPGs of the early days of PC gaming. But with Wasteland 3, I expect them to bridge the gap between old and new gamers, and keep a nice balance for players. I only comment on this due to having to double take when returning to the game after a year, and newcomers would definitely not hold on just on the promise of the brilliant narrative experience to come. Divinity Original Sin, and especially its sequel, struck a brilliant balance between recapturing classic CRPG magic and bringing the genre to a new modern audience. From everything being fully voiced to the massive array of variable playstyles, providing any new players with an easy look into the tactical RPG genre. The gameplay and UI changes for Wasteland 3 that we've seen from the Gamescom trailer is certainly in the right direction, with a sleeker look and smoother combat system, reminiscent of what the Bearded Ladies Consulting did with Mutant Year Zero, which is exactly what I wanted to see. However, there are still a few details that would elevate Wasteland 3 to the standard of game that it deserves to be. One of my biggest complaints about Wasteland 2 would be the voice acting. It's not necessarily bad or great, but it's lacking. In general, it's lacking a presence that would support the brilliant storytelling fantastically. We do get key pieces of information via voice lines, however, the lack of fully voiced dialogue really lets down the impact of the writing. This in itself would aid the accessibility for the game, due to allowing players to experience the narrative at their own pace, whether that's reading through it in their own time, or experiencing the charisma or general banter that truly bursts out of the speakers. As it stands, it's far too inconsistent, and is definitely a weak spot, letting down what is truly a very interesting story. I understand that the game is sitting at a lower budget than your huge open world RPGs, and can't exactly fund 100 different voice actors to bring all of their characters to life, but look at the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, a game that utilised only a handful of voice actors, and sure, it can get a little repetitive at times, but the linkage to the different races works in its own little way. My point is simply that big RPG worlds can be pulled off with smaller voice casts, and Wasteland 3 would certainly benefit from using audio more to build the game world. A new addition to the Wasteland games in 3 is vehicles, showcased in the announcement trailer. However, I'm hoping they're not just used in the overworld as a faster variant of the patrolling that was seen in Wasteland 2, but rather as a hub for travelling in the overworld, and also utilised as a place of solitude, safety, and even offence in specific in-game circumstances. Even if we're presented with a basic version of the vehicle near the start of the game, and as we progress and garner more and more money and equipment along our journey, we can upgrade it to be more useful, perhaps allowing for it to carry some of our gear, permitting further customization of our characters whilst we're on the road. Or maybe even expanding on the weaponry that the vehicle can support our characters with, for the more brutal firefights or an assault on some bandit base. This would allow the vehicle, or vehicles, plural, to act as some sort of character in its own right, adding to the player's unique journey across Colorado. Something else that's new is the addition of multiplayer. Similarly, in Divinity Original Sin, you'll be able to have a friend play, or perhaps even create one or more of the characters within your party. Linking in with the vehicle upgrades I've suggested, the multiplayer could allow for multiple moves at the same time during combat, with one character using the vehicle as cover shooting out of it, whilst another is sitting on the turret. The vehicle could possibly be upgraded to have multiple turrets, however this is a little unlikely. One of the problems I found whilst playing through a cooperative game of Original Sin 2 was the way the NPCs interact with your characters, occasionally defaulting to a specific character that may have not actually interacted with them, and completely stopping the game. I'd much rather that the two players, at least during exploration out with combat, are separate entities. In Divinity, it felt like it was more of a local co-op than an online roleplay session. Ideally, I talk to a character and gather some intel whilst my friend does something else. I can then decide whether the information was worth sharing, or I could even be playing an asshole character who doesn't want to share the information, leaving the other party members in the dark. This both allows for the players to each have their own freedom within the game, and not being forced to interact with someone they may have not wanted to, halting the flow of their experience. This will also impact positively for role-playing variety, and by the sounds of it, the game will allow each player to separately control their own ranger squads, and hopefully this leads to total autonomy for both players without being forced into conversations or halt movement due to the other player entering combat. Which leads me into another issue I came across with Wasteland 2 during my second playthrough: role-playing variety. Not to say the game is lacking role-playing variety, especially when you compare to other recent RPGs. However, there is still plenty of room for improvement when discussing Wasteland 3. I occasionally like to test certain games' role-playing capabilities, and I noticed within Wasteland 2 you cannot actually complete the game as a non-desert ranger. You can still be an asshole, using your hard-ass or smart-ass skills, along with murdering people. However, the repercussions are fairly limited. You may piss off some villagers or lose a pre-created party member like Angela Death, but you don't seem to get kicked out of the Rangers. The ability to abandon your original task given to you and taking things into your own hands as a complete asshole bandit crook isn't quite possible. All I'm saying is I'd like the option to be some bad guy who leaves their desert ranger days behind them, or strive for sainthood by helping every traveller I stumble upon. In a game such as Fallout New Vegas, no matter your karma, faction standing, or really whatever you do, you can always carry out a storyline and complete the game in some way. There are battling factions to choose from, and usually you can create unique experiences throughout your first few playthroughs, which I felt lacking from Wasteland 2. I'd like Wasteland 3 to explore some more wacky ideas with factions and cults, giving the player more variety and allowing them to truly take the wheel and thoroughly roleplay their character to their heart's content. The fact that Wasteland 3 supposedly opens up with you as the sole survivor of Team November gives me hope that you'll be able to take things in your own direction. However, you're still a part of the Desert Rangers in some capacity. Perhaps you'll be able to sever ties with them and start fresh, joining up with an already present faction, or maybe even using the promised supplies from the Patriarch of Colorado Springs to craft a new faction of your own, ruling over Colorado in any way the player sees fit. We can only wait and find out. I do hope the Wasteland team can make some proper modern improvements so they can maybe even challenge the original Sun games. Anyway, if you've already had early access to the game, feel free to share your thoughts on it down below in the comments. My name is Andrew or Stalli111. Make sure to drop a like, drop a comment and subscribe if you've not done so already, and I'll see you on my next video. Bye bye.